Hello everyone, welcome. On behalf of our co-owners, Jen and Gray, pushing their second year of owning Chaucer's. Welcome to Chaucer's Books. We're here to listen to photographer and creator Robert Landau, who created a beautiful book, Art Deco in Los Angeles. We'll have these books out in the front, behind the registers. We do ask that you purchase them prior to getting them signed. We'll have a little signing out there in the main room once we're done here. In front, in the counters, we have Gretchen, Dee, Jesse, Sam, and Frankie here working the kids' room to help you out with any needs that you have to finding other books as well. As you can see, I'm filming this for a YouTube channel. It'll be available on our YouTube, Chaucer's Books YouTube, shortly after tonight's completion. At this time, I invite you to turn off your cell phones or silence them to give Robert our undivided attention. You too, Robert. Yeah. Okay, tonight from 5 to 7, this is a benefit from the nonprofit American Institute of Architecture, Santa Barbara. We were hoping to have somebody here. Hopefully they'll come later to talk about what they do. But 10% of all sales from 5 to 7 are going to the AIA of Santa Barbara. So let's begin. Tonight's speaker, he's a photographer and author of several visual books, including the international acclaimed Rock and Roll Billboards of the Sunset Strip, which unfortunately is sold out. It's back ordered right now. We tried to get some for you, Robert. Check that book out. It's pretty awesome. His photographs have been shown all over the world. A native Angelino. Wow. What high school did you go to? Fairfax High. Okay, you're the original gangster. His take on LA is distinctly passionate and journalistic, but this book is amazing. Please welcome Robert Landau. So come and I'll ask you a couple questions and we can go into your presentation.
Want to do that first?
Yeah, let's ask you just a couple questions really quick and say, how did you become a photographer?
Maybe I'll answer.
Okay, you want to answer that?
Let's do that after.
All right, let's do that after. Take it away, Robert. Thank you. Okay.
Listen, thanks. Really appreciate everyone for coming out. And thank you, Michael, for arranging this. And I'll turn away from you, but I'll look back every once in a while. You'll be looking at the screen. So, I've been photographing Los Angeles for close to 50 years. And I consider myself first and foremost an urban landscape photographer. As I wrote in the books afterward, mainly as a disclaimer, I have no professional background in architecture, and I never consciously set out to create a book about Art Deco. The subject kind of found me. I occasionally and begrudgingly write about the things I photograph, and I say begrudgingly because writing is hard work, and unlike photography, which for me is a labor of love, writing is just hard labor. In the case of this book, which was always intended to be a picture book, and which focuses so particularly on architecture, I felt that the photographs deserved to have an informed written component, not only to help see them in their proper context, but also to explain what differentiates Art Deco architecture in Los Angeles from other cities. And so I turned to architect and author Alan Hess to write an essay as a foreword to the book, which he did brilliantly. And I reserved my thoughts and words for the things I know best, which is why and how these images in this book came to be. It seems I've been drawing or making pictures since I was a child, but I was given my first real camera at age 15 by an uncle in New York who worked in a camera store, and I've been taking pictures ever since. My interest in photography began at an even earlier age when I discovered art books on my father's bookshelves that presented the life's work of various European street photographers from the early part of the 20th century. People like Eugene Atget and Andre Cortege, whose images transported me to another place in time, particularly the streets of old Paris. I sat for hours and pored over these books that usually had minimal but meaningful text that were then followed by page after page of beautifully reproduced photographs. Those books not only fueled my love for photography, but also my love for books. I've come to see books as the ideal medium to discover and enjoy photography. As much as I like seeing individual prints and frames hanging on a wall, I cling to the belief that a carefully conceived and lovingly produced book can offer the unique opportunity to more closely examine and appreciate a large body of cohesive imagery, which then, considered as a whole, can also tell a larger story. And unlike viewing digital images on a screen that seems to goad you to consume, click, and move on, a well-printed book on quality paper also offers a tactile experience, which suggests that you take a more meditative and unhurried approach to connecting with the imagery before turning the page to see what comes next. I was born and grew up in Los Angeles. My father, Felix Landau, had immigrated to New York from Austria in the late 1930s, and then after serving in the military in the 1940s, relocated to Los Angeles a decade later, where he opened a frame shop on Melrose Avenue in West Hollywood, which later became the Felix Landau Gallery. I recall growing up in the 1960s when there were new exhibitions opening at his gallery every month, and our home, which was just a few blocks away, was always filled with art and artists. I may have been a bit young at the time to fully grasp it all, but I now realize how fortunate I was to have grown up in that environment. From the books I had begun admiring, my action plan on becoming a photographer was to take my camera out into the world and make photos of whatever caught my eye. My world at that time was the streets of Los Angeles, particularly in the nearby neighborhoods of Hollywood and West Hollywood, that I could walk to with my camera on my shoulder. I set out with a few rolls of black and white film and started taking pictures. This is the window display of a shop on Hollywood Boulevard that sold magic tricks, and where I would always buy my annual Halloween mask. Well, it didn't take me very long to realize that LA was an entirely different kind of city than Paris. Los Angeles, in the latter half of the 20th century, was clearly not a city of romantic old world charm. One of the first things I noticed back then is there were never a lot of people on the street. At that time, LA was, and probably still is, primarily a city of cars that transport people from one destination to another. And unlike Paris, there were no sidewalk cafes to sip wine in, no public squares to gather in, and very few tree-lined parks to stroll in. LA just looked different. A working network of a functioning metro system was decades away, and images of forlorn-looking people waiting endlessly at bus stops did not appeal to me as great subject matter. Coincidentally, however, an early black and white photograph I took, actually the first photo I ever had published, was of some bus stop benches in Hollywood with ads depicting the faces of actor Clark Gable and President Abraham Lincoln. Back then, the LA Times had a printed magazine in its Sunday edition called West Magazine, and they chose this image for honorable mention in their annual photo contest. While it may not have resembled the quaint antiquity of Paris or the dynamic street life of the East Coast cities I had visited, LA, in its sunnier climate, still had something unique about the way it looked. Los Angeles, as a city coming of age in the 20th century, had clearly developed around, with, and for automobiles, and for the convenience and more leisurely suburban lifestyle they permit. Since early on, the city has leveraged its wide open spaces to spread out horizontally with long commercially zoned boulevards that connect a series of small towns like Culver City, Westwood, Santa Monica, Van Nuys, Woodland Hills, Tarzana, Hollywood, Inglewood, Hawthorne, Long Beach, Pasadena, Altadena, Arcadia, each with unique neighborhoods and each their own distinct personalities, all of which now seem to be blended together into one more homogenized megalopolis connected by a pervasive freeway system. But in this period where I was first discovering Los Angeles and making these black and white photos, I was also starting to notice architecture, and there were a few eye-catching skyscrapers around, like the Capitol Record Building in Hollywood. But for the most part, the buildings in LA, both commercial and residential, other than in downtown, tended to be shorter and more spread out than most typical modern cities, and homes were mostly single-family structures. Also, at least in my neighborhood, there were a great many smaller apartment buildings of varying capacity, and local businesses were generally 1 or 2 story affairs on commercially zoned streets with their own parking lots. In those days, before big box megastores and the ubiquitous nationally franchised chains put a majority of these smaller businesses out of business, most neighborhoods were comprised of locally owned and operated grocery stores, diners, movie houses, hardware stores, stationery stores, and the likes, and they all brought a great deal of individuality and cultural character to their neighborhoods. All of these aspects played a part in forming the physical appearance and local flavor of the city I grew up in and wanted to capture with my camera. To the unaccustomed or unappreciative eye, the city could easily look like an unending mess of urban planning run amok. To me, it was an opportunity to explore and find clues to better comprehend the culture I was born into. What I liked most about the city in this period was that very few things looked alike. Even the majority of gas stations were different. This one on Sawtell Boulevard in West LA most definitely had some Art Deco heritage. As soon as I got my driver's license, I set out to explore some of the farther communities from mine, and the funkier and lesser well-known to me, the more I look forward to making new cultural discoveries with my camera. It seemed apparent that due to all of these factors, the Los Angeles cityscape had developed its own unique and often quite creative visual language, sometimes referred to as vernacular, whereby elements of the built landscape could instantly communicate with drivers and the passengers in their cars about what they had to offer. Drive-in movie theaters and restaurants, neon signs, oversized billboards, three-dimensional advertising figures, and buildings shaped like donuts or giant hot dogs. Even dingbat apartment buildings with funny names and signs were all competing for the attention of passing motorists with bold shapes, bright colors, and other amusing visual gimmickry. At that time, Los Angeles, the city, as seen by most outsiders, was considered to be kitsch and lacking in any real cultural depth. But I chose to view these elements I was finding and photographing as urban artifacts of a new form of creativity invented out of an honest cultural necessity to interact and survive in this most modern of cities. And it didn't hurt that pop art had recently exploded onto the art scene, making common commercial imagery like Andy Warhol's Campbell's soup cans worthy of consideration as high art, and further blurring the once more clearly defined lines that had existed between high and low culture in America. Around that same time, something else of a more personal nature happened. My parents were getting divorced, and I went to live with my father in his new apartment on Shoreham Drive, just a block above the Sunset Strip, and a short walk to where Tower Records was located. Tower finally closed in 2006, and this structure is now the home to the Supreme brand. Up until then, the Sunset Strip had always been a place I might go to when I wanted to buy a record, or maybe hear live music in a club. It was a place I might visit once a month, but living right there and being on the street every day throughout most of the 1970s, while at the same time getting more and more interested in photography, would lead me many years later to create the book I'm perhaps best known for so far, The Rock and Roll Billboards of the Sunset Strip. Back then, I could walk out the front door of my new home with my camera and see ant-sized workers installing and touching up monumental-sized billboards depicting all of the period's great classic rockers. I say touching up because in those pre-digital days, the best ones were all hand-painted on plywood panels. After transporting and installing them to the strip, a painter was on hand to touch up any nicks to the painted surface. A lot of things came together for me at that time. To begin with, I was a fan of the bands and musicians being depicted on those billboards. I was able to recognize the artful way these one-of-a-kind images had been conceived and created. And long before cell phones, I carried a camera around with me wherever I went. And also, I had witnessed firsthand how quickly they would appear and then vanish, so I began snapping photos of my favorites, fully aware that if I didn't take a picture when I first saw it, that opportunity might be lost forever. even though it took many years for that book to arrive, it would not be published until 2013. There were lessons taken from the Sunset Strip imagery that I took to heart much sooner. For one thing, I began seeing Los Angeles in color. The billboard imagery derived from cutting-edge album cover art was vividly colorful, and a great deal would have been lost had they only been seen in black and white. This also forced me to recognize that within the LA cityscape, color, more than an embellishment, had become part of the subject matter. So from that point on, I always added rolls of color transparency film to my camera bag. Oh, and by the way, what made the billboard from this era so unique was that quite often there was little or no advertising copy, and it was left for the viewer to decipher the visual meanings. This one happened to be for a rock opera called Tommy by the British band The Who that was about a deaf, dumb, and blind pinball wizard. Another lesson taken was that the LA popular culture, driven no doubt by the presence of the entertainment industry and its obsession for the newest and latest thing, is in a constant state of change and turnover. The average lifespan of these billboards was 30 days from the time they were painted and installed, and then removed to be painted over with newer messages. Now I'd like to share with you just a few of my favorite hand-painted billboards that appeared on the Sunset Strip in the 1970s, defining that period of time and then vanishing just as quickly as they had arrived. This is one actually from 1969 for the Beatles' Abbey Road. Again, no copy, you can see. The designer had the idea to just cut these well-known heads out and have them stand off the top of the billboard frame. And Capitol Records, this is the Beatles. It was their last studio album, but it was their first billboard on the strip. And Capitol Records was kind of slow to come to this form of outdoor advertising medium. It was more the smaller independent labels who began it. Here is one from 1971 by a group called Humble Pie. And this one illustrates how we're talking about pop art. Well, the pop artists like, Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein had mined commercial imagery and give it a new twist to create pop art. And in a very short time, the commercial artists took that back, and you can see that sort of appearing in this billboard here. Here is one for a group called Procol Harum from 1971 also. And there's no getting away from the fact that certain drugs of a mind-bending variety were popular with the generation I was part of. And I think this billboard definitely captures that. Here is one for a group called Wishbone Ash. That was a billboard right on the top of the Whiskey A Go-Go. That was always painted with unusual colors. But again, illustrating, these billboards were not really about selling anything. They were just really about letting people who are already fans or people in the other people in the music industry know that a certain group had a new record out. So again, very minimal text and very strong, striking graphics that you could recognize or notice right away. Here's another one like that for a group called Nazareth. This was a 1973 release. Here's one for a David Bowie record in 1974. This was by, original artwork was by a Belgian artist named Guy Pielard, who had done a book called Rock Dreams, where he imagined from Belgium what his rock idols looked like. And he came up with this notion of David Bowie as kind of a half-man, half-dog circus freak. And to make it fit the billboard format, which is this long horizontal shape, they just mirrored it back over itself and made this very compelling billboard. Here's another one, again, very minimal text. This is, since they're already recognizable, Crosby, Stills, and Nash by this time, on a billboard over a place called Licorice Pizza on the strip. There were two great record stores then, Tower and Licorice Pizza. And this one was kitty corner right across the street from the Whiskey A Go-Go. Here is another one for Pink Floyd, billboard in that period. Pink Floyd was already known for having great graphics and a lot of interesting visuals in their live acts. But this billboard, when it first went up, it was just a bricked up wall. There was no imagery, just the bricks. And slowly over time, as you pass it, you had to live in the area to see this, they would remove the bricks and slowly reveal this message underneath it, these images. And finally, at the very end, they painted what the title of the record was. But up until then, nobody had any idea what they were selling. Here is one right across the street from Tower Records for Marvin Gaye. And Motown had an office a little further east. And in this period of the 70s, so many otherwise, sort of separate genres all kind of gained a footing in the mainstream. So there was really a great variety of music acts being promoted on these billboards. Toward the end of the 70s, there was clearly a change in what was happening on, and there was kind of this new wave scene coming along. People like Elvis Costello had a different look and a different approach to advertising, and that was short-lived. By the 1980s, this is the Eurythmics on a giant hand-painted sign that was out in front of Capitol Records. By 1981, MTV had happened, and all the money that had gone into these artistic billboards was kind of drained away to make sort of slick music videos for MTV where they could reach a much larger global audience. Okay, now I realize that I have blathered on quite some time and hardly even mentioned the phrase Art Deco. As a photographer focusing on LA, I had now trained my eye to pick out authentic urban artifacts that hold meaning and artistically reflect our culture and the time they were created, and then photograph them in a personal way. I really wasn't thinking about the age of those artifacts or any particular architecture style. I was focused on things like originality, creativity, and authenticity. The darkroom was a camera store on Wilshire Boulevard, where I would occasionally buy rolls of film, and this is probably the first Art Deco photo I ever shot, though I wasn't aware of that fact at the time. I just liked it. Which reminds me of a short story about how this work came to be. A little over a year ago, book designer Franz Evenhaus and I had a meeting with Terry Akamatsu, who's the editorial director of publisher Angel City Press, to pitch her some ideas for new book projects. Terry came to my house and we sat around the kitchen table where we presented her 2 or 3 book ideas showing her photos and sample idea layouts with possible covers. The meeting went well and we seemed to agree that all of the projects under discussion were doable. The question we were left with was, which one should we focus on first? I also recall that at some point during that meeting, Terry glanced up at the wall in my kitchen where there were 2 framed photographs of Art Deco details and asked me, what are those? I explained to her that they were not part of any specific project I was working on, but that whenever I was out in the city shooting pictures and I noticed something in that style, it seemed to attract my attention. So she asked me if I had many more photos on the subject, and my answer was, I don't know, but I'll look. I was a late convert to digital photography, so the great majority of photographs I've taken in my life are on film, either black and white negatives or color transparencies. Going through that archive takes time, and things are not always filed where I'd expect them to be. Nonetheless, within a few hours, I found several hundred images related to Art Deco. Here's a photo I took in the late 1970s of the Moxley Dog and Cat Hospital on Highland Avenue, right near my junior high school. I passed this building many times going to school in the mid-60s, and then returned a decade later to make the photo. The 35mm slide was filed in a folder in my studio labeled Signs, and it hadn't previously occurred to me that it might be a relic from the Deco era until that meeting with Terry. I also came across photos of buildings that I had clear memories of being at in my early teen years, like the Pan Pacific Auditorium on Beverly Boulevard near the original Farmers Market, where traveling expositions like the annual auto show were held in the years before the convention center downtown was built. Here's a closer in detail shot of that building's iconic interior facade, which has now been recreated at the entrance to the Disney California Adventure theme park, and also appears on the logo for the Los Angeles Art Deco Society. These pictures were taken in the late 70s and early 80s, just before this incredible and historic building was destroyed by a fire of somewhat mysterious origin. The Gilmore Drive-In Theater is another one from that period in the same neighborhood. I remember watching the movie Easy Rider there from inside my first car. The giant outdoor movie screen is on the other side of this pastel-colored late Deco structure built in 1948, and that is the exact location where the Grove Shopping Center stands today. This picture was taken in 1979, and I was lucky enough to catch that taxi cab from an even earlier era passing by. In any event, the next time Terry and I spoke, I told her that I had indeed made many more photos on the subject of Art Deco in Los Angeles than I had even realized, and her reply was something like, "That's good, because I think that should be our next book." And while the concept of this new book was still coming together, and the deadline of a few months was set to get all the photos in, I thought, great, not only will that give me time to locate some more Deco buildings, but also to go back and revisit some of these sites with my camera, which is something I enjoy doing anyway, although I wasn't sure how many of the places I had already photographed would still be there. Sadly, the Dog Hospital, Pan Pacific Auditorium, and the Gilmore Drive-In are all long gone, but gloriously, as a testament to their staying power, most of the structures you can see in the book are still there nearly a century later. For me, returning to make new images of the same places is valuable, not only because it allows me to look for new angles to photograph, but usually the light, weather, and time of day are different, so the resulting images will always look different. There are many places in this city that I return to, not only to make new photos, but because they are a part of life here that I enjoy revisiting. Places like the Hollywood Bowl, Catalina Island, Griffiths Observatory, the Central Library, and Union Station, among others. The task for me as a photographer is to find new ways to see them with each new visit. Usually I'll begin by trying to get the best classic shot that I can get of each place. That is, the view that tells the whole story as much as possible in one single frame. This photo was taken for an assignment in 1996, so I had permission to set up a tripod in order to get this image at dusk. Once that's out of the way, my eye starts looking around for details that capture something more essential about the spirit of the place, images that set it apart from anywhere else. For me, in this case, it was the fountain at the entrance to the bowl. I became a bit obsessed with it and have returned many times over the years and at different times of day. It seems to me that this incredible piece of Art Deco art is too easily overlooked by bowl patrons hurrying past, eager to get to their seats and picnic baskets, or later on to get out of that crazy parking lot. Counting the book's cover image, there are 4 photos taken of the bowl, and these sculptures, made by artist George Stanley in 1940, that all convey different uses of the arts and all powerfully express aspects of Art Deco style. Stanley, by the way, is perhaps better known for creating the iconic statuette that is handed out annually at the Oscar Awards. Catalina Island, with its historic ballroom, is another place I've enjoyed photographing and returning to, perhaps less frequently because of the distance, but usually with good results. A major part of the approach I've developed while trying to capture the essence of Art Deco style in this time period involves eliminating as much as possible, and mostly by choice of shooting angle, any overtly contemporary artifacts, such as specifically more up-to-date cars, buildings, and signs from the frame. That is why I generally work in close to the subject and focus often on details. This, however, is a case where in a wider picture, taken at dawn from a distance, there's nothing but palm trees and boats to date the image visually. I think only true boat enthusiasts would be able to guess the exact year this picture was taken. At night, the date references are even more muted, and I was attracted enough by the colorful lighting to want to set up a tripod and make this image. I don't recall any celebration or event taking place there that night, but people have pointed out to me that it must have been Mardi Gras, as those are the colors of that festive holiday. I generally try not to point my camera up at an angle when shooting architecture, like this colonnade around the ballroom, but sometimes it can create a heightened sense of movement and vertigo that adds drama and helps move your eye through the curves. Now, you're probably noticing that I'm not stopping to name the architect and year of each building. That information is all in the book along with the locations. But I will mention here that this building in Avalon is the work of architect David Malcolm Renton from 1929. And the underwater mosaic scene with Deco mermaid adorning the building was created by John Gabriel Beckman. This detail of the energetic zigzag box office at the entrance to the ballroom all but ensures that you will be having a lively time inside. Another LA landmark that I visited since childhood is the Griffith Observatory. Weather is such a key factor in all outdoor photography, and returning often increases the chance of getting lucky with some unusual natural lighting, like a dramatic sky with puffy clouds and some late afternoon sunlight peeking through. The observatory, because of its classic Deco architecture, has always felt like a temple of science, and the astronomers on their monument outside the entrance are portrayed as gods to be looked up to. Not all buildings are lit up at night, but when they are, the mix of artificial and ambient lighting can usually be counted on to create dramatic effects, even when the weather is a bit gloomy. In LA's Deco heyday, primarily the 1930s, some great murals were created, particularly by the artist Hugo Balin, whose work here in the observatory's entry rotunda is the most recent photograph I've taken for this book. It was shot not long ago when friends from overseas were visiting and wanted to see the building where the classic night fight scene with James Dean from Rebel Without a Cause was filmed. Now, before I share a few more of my favorite classics from the book, I'd like to talk for a moment about another more recent occurrence that I just began noticing as I went out more recently to shoot new images, and that I'm hoping points to an emerging trend. Several abandoned Art Deco era structures around town, instead of being torn down and replaced, are being repurposed and restored. An obvious example of this is the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, housed in the Art Deco shell of the old May Company department store on Wilshire Boulevard in the Miracle Mile district. Other examples include a classic movie theater on Manchester Boulevard in Inglewood that is now a neighborhood church. There are even a few repurposed Deco-era gas stations, like this Gilmore service station on Highland Avenue in Hollywood from 1935 that is now a drive-through Starbucks. And there's this beautifully restored, also 1930s era, Texaco gas station on Beverly Boulevard that serves fresh lobster to patrons who pull up in their cars to a spot where gas pumps once stood. Now, as promised, here are a few of my favorites. I'll start right away with the Eastern Columbia building on Broadway, which is a building my eye was attracted to long before I really knew anything about Art Deco. Just these beautiful turquoise blue terracotta tiles and the gold trim. This building was by the architect Claude Bielman. It was originally built in 1929 as a department store. It actually housed two separate stores, the Eastern Building and the Columbia Building. So it's commonly referred to as the Eastern Columbia Building. It has now been converted to condominiums, and it's not easy to get inside. I was fortunate. I had a friend who for a short while had one of the condominiums there, so I was able to go in and get up to the roof to get this photograph of the rooftop swimming pool and a closer view of that beautiful clock tower. But I just think this is a gorgeous building that could compete with any Art Deco building anywhere. So that kind of answers people's question of my favorite.
That's cool.
Here is this is downtown LA. This is a Coca-Cola bottling plant. The architect is Robert V. Dara. This was built in 1938. This is in a little industrial zone, sort of southeast of downtown LA. And the term Art Deco actually came much later. I think it was coined in a book in the 60s or 70s. So long after the Art Deco period, the name Art Deco came to stick. But it covers a period of approximately 3 different aspects of Art Deco. The original being a sort of a zigzag period, the first Art Deco period, which was followed by a modern streamlined period, which this falls into. And following that was this more modern period, which that drive-in theater you saw is part of that. But I think what all these architects were after, especially starting in the 1920s, and even some prior to that are considered to be Art Deco. So, but I think what they were really trying to do was differentiate architecture in the 20th century from what had preceded it. And I think that's what a lot of artists do. They're trying to capture some sense of the time they're living in and the dynamism of it. So clearly, they were open to a lot of different ideas, and you'll see different styles of Art Deco architecture. But this one clearly resembles a giant boat, you know, in the ocean, even with little portholes. And there's another building by the same architect in Hollywood called the Crossroads of the World that also has this kind of nautical theme to it, with this tower with a revolving globe at the top. This one houses offices. It's still, these buildings are all still there. And at one time, Alfred Hitchcock had an office there. At one time, Taschen Books had their headquarters there. And more recently, a guy I know by the name of John Kosh, who designed the Beatles, Abbey Road, who designed that image for the Beatles Abbey Road, had his office there. So it's sort of a creative center right in Hollywood. Cool. Here is another beautiful sort of classic Art Deco tower building. Some of LA's Art Deco, like the previous one, is horizontal because LA had the space for it, whereas places like Chicago and New York, most of the Art Deco architecture is in extreme vertical towers, but LA has a few of those, and this is one of the great ones, the Wiltern Theater, so named because it's at the corner of Wilshire and Wiltern, and it's a place where it's actually can look quite different from different sides, so I photographed it from different places. I couldn't remember when I did the book, I wanted to put in the book not only the year the building's from, but the year I photographed it. And this was a Kodachrome slide, and wasn't always good about writing the date that I took the picture. And I couldn't remember what date I had taken this picture. So I thought I'd look a little closer into it for any clues. And I looked at the marquee. You can't see it from here, but in the book, you look up closely, it says the Rolling Stones. I said, well, this is a theater for about 1,000 people. Why would the Rolling Stones be playing there? Well, I remembered that they did occasionally play small theaters, and they would announce it like the day before as a way of introducing and maybe a new record or something. And so anyway, I Googled that, and I knew they'd only played there once, so I said, when did the Rolling Stones ever play at the Wiltern? And it was 2002, so that's how I know this picture was taken in 2002. This is a detail from the Wiltern Theater. Both inside, there's some really great details, but this one happens to be in the little courtyard area just above the box office. So there are these great details, and that's something I love picking out and just kind of making my own piece of art from their art. Here's another, I think, beautiful detail in the building not far from there. I think this is around maybe 3rd Street in Western. It's called the Selig, let me see, let me get the exact name for you. The Selig Clothing Store. It was by an architect named Arthur E. Harvey in 1931. And it was an early multi-purpose building. It had, I think, 2 or 3 shops in it. And it also has the distinction of being a rare black and gold deco, which is another subgenre of zigzag. And there aren't too many of those. In fact, there's maybe one other existing in LA still, but the most important one was a building downtown. It was the headquarters of Richfield Oil. It's called the Richfield Tower. There's a picture of it in the book. I found an old postcard of it. But that building was unfortunately demolished in 1968 and never got a picture of it. This building, which I took this picture in 2005, I drove by it recently, and it's been pretty junked up with signage and stuff, but at least the original building is still intact. Here is a building right on Hollywood Boulevard. This is the Hollywood Toy and Costume Building, but it may look familiar because it was originally a J.J. Newberry, and the architect credit for it is just the J.J. Newberry Company. So my feeling is they may have had other buildings similar to this in other cities, but this was their building in Hollywood that later became Hollywood Toy and Costume. The original building was in 1928. This picture was taken in 2006, but about 30 years earlier, that's where I took the picture of the Halloween mask in black and white in one of those windows. So that's where I get my Halloween costume. Here's another very elegant tower, Art Deco tower. This one's right on the Sunset Strip. So it was a building I passed a lot in my rock and roll billboard days, but didn't photograph it so much later. And just a very elegant building, and again, a camera on a tripod with a long exposure so you get this sort of flow of traffic and creating sort of the excitement and elegance of that period of time. This building was built in 1931 by Leland Bryant, architect, and it's hosted many famous guests over the years, or people who've stayed there, including Howard Hughes, Marilyn Monroe, and gangster Bugsy Siegel. Had an office there for a while. Here now is the LA Central Library downtown. This building was first made in 1926. Bertram, Goodhue, and Winslow. It's had some fires and things have changed in the interior, but the exterior kind of remains intact from its original period. And I had to include this not only because I like the building, but because they are now co-publisher of my book. Not too long ago, the original publishers wanted to retire, and instead of selling Angel City Press, they decided they would will it to the city. And it took 2 or 3 years to work it out legally. And so right now the full name of the publisher is Angel City Press, LA Public Library. Here's another one that doesn't get overlooked because people are aware of this fountain. It's at a key intersection at Santa Monica and Wilshire Boulevard at the western end of Beverly Hills, and you can't help but notice these, flashing lights and the water display. But when you get up close, you realize that the centerpiece is this very beautiful Art Deco sculpture. Let me find the name of the guy. Robert Merrill Gage is the sculptor. This is from 1931, and this artwork was a gift to the city of Beverly Hills from Harold Lloyd, silent screen star Harold Lloyd's mother. And it depicts a kneeling Tonga tribe member in prayer. Here, of course, is the famous Union Station, seen in many movies, and it's particularly of the noir period. And this historic building, again, the openness of architect is that period to combine different aesthetics and different influences. This is Art Deco combined with mission style to give it a sense of this kind of huge mission. Here's another one that combines this one Mayan details. This is the Mayan Theater downtown. It's a beautiful theater, very ornately ornamented. The entire outside of this building looks like that, and there's some nice ornamentation inside too. This one was, the building is credited to Morgan, Walls, and Clements, but the details on the outside by an artist named Francisco Cornejo. The building dates to 1927. It was originally a legit theater, then a movie house. More recently, it's been a punk rock venue, and now it's a chic discotheque. Here is the Hollywood Theater, right on Hollywood Boulevard. S. Charles Lee, 1946. That's a real, but not a Technicolor sunset. The sunsets in those years were a little more colorful, no doubt due to all the particulates in the air, but you don't believe me, you can look at the slide that was on that light box. Those were the colors. It's not been photoshopped. And Hollywood played a very important role in disseminating Art Deco architecture and making it known to the whole world, because in the 1930s, the people who designed many of the sets in the movies particularly in dance scenes or in music scenes, the interiors were definitely had an Art Deco style to them, and that imagery went out to people all over the world via Hollywood movies that were popular everywhere in that period. Here's another movie theater, this one in Westwood Village. This is the Fox Village Theater. Piercy Park Lewis is the architect from 1931. And the legacy of this one being kept intact is pretty good because recently a group of Hollywood people, including Jason Reitman and a group of A-list directors, raised a lot of money to turn this theater into a year-round home for premieres, panels, and for film lovers alike to enjoy. Again, the openness of Art Deco architects to bring in different and unique materials and openness to things like neon light was really important, and there's some great use of neon and other signage with Art Deco buildings. Art Deco was first introduced right in the early 1900s. I think the first Art Deco sign was in Paris for a barber shop, but this one that came later, this is probably from the 1940s. It's a famous watering hole right next to the Pantages Theater in Hollywood. Kind of combines design elements of both zigzag design and sort of the streamlined modern fluidity of the letters, and so it just sort of captures that spirit of Art Deco for me. Here is one. When I had this period where I had more time to go out and shoot more pictures, I asked Alan Hess if he might be aware of buildings that I would have never seen, or that didn't know of, and he suggested a few. This is one in a little city called Maywood, which is northeast of downtown, and this is the City Hall police station. I think they even have a small jailhouse there, but it's the only thing in Maywood worth seeing. But pretty interesting little building surrounded by Taco Bells and things, much less interesting things, but worth it if you're in that area to stop by and see this building. Here's a great discovery. This is a place I had driven by many times. This is Burbank City Hall, of all places. And I'd driven by that building. It's got an Art Deco exterior, a tall shaped building. It's kind of interesting. Nothing special about it. I finally returned to take a picture of it. But when I did that, I said, I don't usually go into buildings, but I thought, well, this is a public building. I think it's okay to go in and take pictures. I usually like to have permission before I'm going to start taking pictures. But I did walk into this one, and I was totally blown away by the incredible details. It almost felt like it was somewhere in Eastern Europe or something, instead of downtown Burbank. And this beautiful stairway with that incredible detail. It leads up to a mural there. You don't see it in this image, but if you look up from that staircase, here's the ceiling. So every detail in this building is amazing, and if you are in Burbank, it's definitely worth going into. So I wandered in there with my camera. I think it was a Saturday. There were not too many people. I think a few people paying parking tickets, but a guy in a short sleeve shirt eventually came up to me and said, what are you doing? He was probably curious. So I said, well, I'm working on this book. I'm trying to get more images of Art Deco architecture. He says, well, I'm the mayor of Burbank. I think there's something you'll like to see upstairs. So he took me upstairs, and we went into the chamber room, and there was a curtain on one side, and he drew the curtain back, and there was this beautiful Hugo Balin mural that they hadn't even looked at in many years. They finally cleaned it up, so it's in pristine shape. And I understand why they would keep the curtains closed, because if that was open, nobody would listen to or pay attention to the speakers. But even the woodwork, if you look at this closer in the book or in an opportunity, there's just incredible details, Art Deco details in the woodwork there. So that was a real great discovery for me. Just a few more. Here's a detail. This is a building called the Oviatt Building downtown. It's near the Biltmore, and in that area there are several Deco structures. But this one was, I think, a men's haberdashery. Let me get the details. This is by architecture firm of Walker and Eisen. It's from 1928. It's on Olive Street. This is like a gate outside the property in the front. If you pull back, you can see here are the little those little figurines that I picked out one detail of, but very ornate Deco architecture on the exterior, and then within this sort of open air courtyard that leads into the building. And there's even some Lalique glass in there. Just a beautiful and very ornate Art Deco building. Like I said, this one from 1928. Here's one from the late Deco period, again going back to Burbank, not too far from the other building. This is the Burbank Water and Power Building, and it's got this beautiful, I don't know if we call that a frieze or this sculptural work on the front of the building. I was there that same day, that Saturday, and I looked through the glass. I couldn't get inside, but through the glass I could see that there was a very nice mural inside the lobby, so I need to go back and shoot that. That's one from the late Deco period. Here is a few of the really classic LA Deco buildings. This is Bullock's Wilshire, Parkinson and Parks in 1929. It was a classic department store. In fact, one of the first to move sort of westward from downtown to the Miracle Mile, what's called the Miracle Mile area, and it's now Southwestern Law School. So it's a law school now. And here, of course, probably the most iconic LA building, City Hall. I've taken pictures of this many times. I chose this one for the book because I just liked the fact that it's a color image, but other than the light you see in the sky from the moon lighting up some color in the sky, it's basically a black and white image of this iconic building that's appeared in so many noir movies and police stories. It's probably on the doors of the police squad cars and dragnet. So it's an image that's recognized worldwide and connected to the city of Los Angeles. So before closing here, I'd just like to share a few thoughts taken from the afterword I wrote in the book. It's my opinion that the great cities that have stood over time are great because while they continue to grow and change, they respect and preserve what is great from their past. This requires both an openness to new ideas as well as an appreciation for what has come before. I believe it is the layering of styles and the presence of structures from different eras, sometimes side by side, that make cities interesting, give them texture, and create the personality that makes them unlike anywhere else. Whenever I encounter anything authentically Art Deco in the Los Angeles cityscape, it feels like a new discovery. And while the subjects in the resulting photographs resonate with the vibrant spirit of a bygone era from the past, their ongoing presence and continued relevance keep them perpetually modern, even timeless for me. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll enjoy the book.